What conspiracy theory do you believe in the most? Story 1. I believe the recent reskin of the Sonic the Hedgehog is all a publicity stunt and was planned from the very beginning. Another theory is that someone higher up preferred the bad version and had the final say. Everyone knew it would bomb, so they started teasing it to get the bad reaction to change the guy's mind. When the earliest shots were hints of his design, like the one of just his legs, it was to get a little evidence it would be bad, but it didn't work. It wasn't until the trailer came out that the reaction was so bad that people could make a better model. Story 2, I don't know if it's a popular conspiracy, but YouTube Kids is on some serious brainwashing bullcrap. My baby brother has a tablet that he regularly uses to watch YouTube, and we restricted him to the Kids app, which has seemed like more and more of a bad idea by the videos that are on there. Some are harmless Minecraft videos or songs, but others are just weird, creepy animation, characters stabbing each other with objects, even putting bags over their heads, which my brother decided to try for fun. Definitely brainwashing and conditioning in the worst way possible. Story 3. This one is more personal, but I fully believe it. Long story short, my father in law was good friends with a guy who was pretty high up in Boeing. Like, I knew some top secret stuff. Well, he ended up quitting as he couldn't take the pressure. He was a very paranoid person, to the point it was a hindrance to his life. Well, a few months after he starts telling my FIL that he's being watched and followed, and that the government is coming for him. Like I said, insanely paranoid. A few extra details that will be important. He drove a moped as his primary transportation, and he was very overweight. Lo and behold, he comes up dead a month or so later. The official story is this. He was riding along when a hitchhiker waved him down. He stopped to pick him up, drove a few miles down the road to a secluded wooded area, pulled off the road, walked into the woods, and shot himself. I shouldn't need to explain what's wrong here, but I will anyway. I'm supposed to believe that a guy with crippling paranoia picked up some random hitchhiker and then ended himself. Even if he wasn't paranoid, it's basically impossible for him to fit a small child on his moped with him, let alone a full grown male adult. No information was ever released about the hitchhiker. No name, no statements to the police, nothing. Story 4. Coca-Cola tested high fructose corn syrup in place of sugar and found that while the taste was similar, people could tell the difference. They brought out new Coke to cleanse people's palates and waited until as much of the original formula products had been sold as they could. Then they canceled New Coke and brought back Coke Classic, which was the high fructose corn syrup version, and people didn't have any original stuff left to compare it to. The only reason they made New Coke was to act as a buffer, so people wouldn't notice the change in ingredients. Story 5. Marshmello doesn't actually produce his own music. My biggest piece of evidence is the Creator Arcade video. He speaks and navigates Ableton like someone with only a basic knowledge of music production. He does everything number by number. Producers don't do that. You can't just instantly know that sound needs a boost of exactly 1 decibel at exactly 1.2 kilohertz without even listening to the sound first. He randomly pauses every now and then, presumably to be fed lines. And he seems to lack even a basic understanding of music theory, recreating MIDI by randomly clicking in notes with no regard for the key of the song. Someone with the level of skill he demonstrates should not be capable of making radio quality hits. Story 6. Amazon tracks people who buy Ring doorbells and then waits for those same people to buy another product. Then they send actors and actresses to deliver the next package. While delivering, the actors are told to do something cute or quirky, dance, smell the flowers on the porch, or pet a dog, so that the owners will hopefully see the footage and post it online to social media and give the impression that working for Amazon is actually fun and exciting, all the while getting free advertisement. Story 7. Planned obsolescence. If it's still a conspiracy theory. Why does my phone suddenly develop unseen issues when the new one is released? It's not a coincidence. And who even asked for these tech companies to release a new phone every year? We live in a time where technology is now growing at a rather slower pace compared to the 2000s when there was rapid innovation. It's not like my current phone is getting crappier in 1 year, but wait, it is. Applies to phones, tablets, smartwatches, basically most rather expensive internet-connected devices receiving updates. Story 8, I've posted this one before, but I think that there are high-level rings of abusers and predators specifically, so that those above them can keep them under control. We know that there are kingmakers. While the big actors, musicians, etc. today are certainly talented, there are plenty of B and C listers who could be just as big if only they had the backing of a big publisher like Disney, Paramount, etc. Thing is, making a king is expensive. You have to spend a lot of time and money getting the public to care about them before they start to pay you back. And once they're big, that they don't technically need you anymore. So the kingmakers are naturally going to look for people who are retainable to ensure they get their investment back. They have to. For every king, they make dozens of duds. It's an expensive process. Sometimes that's as simple as them being naive. A good legal contract can lock them in for a long time, and often the only way out is to destroy your value so the kingmaker stops caring. Look at Britney Spears' meltdown, for example. But if you can't get that, then blackmail works just as well. Story 9. The military shot down United Airlines 93 over Pennsylvania on 9/11. They knew it was hijacked and on its way to Washington, D.C., and scrambled jets were right next to it when it went down. Plus, several witnesses saw an explosion in the sky before it crashed. Totally justified given everything happening that day, but the government would never want to admit it. Shot down a commercial aircraft full of innocent Americans over America. Story 10. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. They are supposed to keep out of sight, but because of human or mechanical errors, there have been hiccups with their cloaking, which have resulted in being seen. And that's why there have always been so many reports of them throughout history, but there has never been an attack. It's just us. Also, the reason why we don't see many examples of UFOs now, even though pretty much everyone has a camera, is because people are not that interested in this time period, since we already document aspects of human life all the time. Story 11. Princess Diana's death was orchestrated by Prince Charles. I just can't wrap my head around the idea that this guy has an affair with Camilla and gets caught. Divorce happens, and even during the divorce, and after she is doing absolutely the best, like just killing it still in her duties, mom duties, the gorgeous revenge velvet dress, the entire world adores her. Then all of a sudden, she dies in this car accident due to her driver? You know how many countless times she was driven by someone who was trained and hired specifically for the royal family. Then Prince Charles gets married to Camilla, and all is right and well again in the public eye the world gets to see. Story 12. Federal law enforcement bodies are working with the public and private prison industries to flood the streets with heroin and fentanyl because they see the impending mass legalization of marijuana and can't risk that many empty cells. A massive uptick in street opioid use in the past few years, combined with aggressive policies targeting legitimate pain patients and cutting them off of their medications, as well as restricting doctors' abilities to treat more people with things like Suboxone. It's not big pharma. Why would they allow their most popular and abusable medications to be all but banned if they're as big and powerful as everyone thinks? It's not like they're hawking new treatment drugs and the government is working hard to ban natural alternatives like kratom on top of it. To me, it all points to a concentrated effort to increase drug-related offenses to keep fines and court fees rolling in and cells filled after weed is legal. Story 13. Not sure if it's a conspiracy theory per se, but the Las Vegas shooting and the way it was presented to the public by law enforcement and the media was super fishy. There's just a few too many coincidences and convenient gaps in information. The security guard disappears and then magically reappears for one controlled interview with an obvious handler sitting right by his side. The house getting broken into and the hard drives going missing. The girlfriend who disappeared and then reappeared and then disappeared again, who had apparently listed the FBI as a previous place of employment on her resume. The speed with which it just disappeared from the news cycles, really crazy too, considering it was the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, especially when you consider how much the next three deadliest stuck around in the news cycle: Pulse, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook. There's something that is critically important to the story that is being intentionally withheld. Story 14. My mom is extremely rational and clever, and she firmly believes that Hugo Chavez died before the date actually given by official Venezuelan government statements. Also, Maduro, his chosen successor, could rise to power before actual democratic elections could take place in Venezuela. This, she believes, is supported by the fact that Chavez's health consistently deteriorated towards the end of his life because of cancer, but there were little to no official reports given by the government in that time until his death announcement, and nobody knew of his whereabouts or the veracity of health updates given. His own bodyguard, Lemcy Salazar, said he died in December 2012, but all official reports say he died in March 2013. Story 15. Music feuds don't exist. They are created by record labels. Anybody who thinks Taylor Swift and Katy Perry were feuding are morons. It is a marketing stunt. Their record labels create these feuds to sell music. When Taylor fans think Katy does a song about her, they all buy the song to see what she is saying, then buy her album to find more songs that they think are about Taylor. And the exact same thing for Katy fans. They are given generic songs to sing that people just assumed are about the other, but in reality aren't about anybody. Same goes for rap feuds. An up-and-coming rapper feuds with a more successful rapper to gain popularity, just as that more successful rapper did when they were coming up. All these feuds are just to sell more music. Story 16, I think it's actually pretty realistic for the government slash Google slash whoever to be watching our phones and computers, listening to our conversations. I probably sound crazy, but there have been people whose phones got hacked and were watched. Isn't there supposedly a whole genre of red room type hidden cameras for watching women undress using their webcams? There have even been some apps on the freaking Google Play Store that did that sort of thing. People are getting more and more nosy, and with that nosiness comes more and more technologies for them to be nosy in private and in secret. How unlikely is it really that our government is monitoring us? Story 17, The Access. Hollywood tapes were deliberately leaked in order to distract from Obama's announcement, which occurred on the same day, that Russia was attempting to interfere in the 2016 presidential elections. The tapes were released as part of a disinformation campaign, and the people latched on to its hook, line, and sinker. People still refer to these tapes in support of their various causes, even though they were initially intentionally weaponized against them. Story 18. Lyme disease was developed by the U.S. government on Plum Island off the Connecticut coast as a biological weapon to release into the environment of foreign enemies to make their soldiers lethargic and thus more easily overtaken in battle. They lost control of the experiment, and now it's rapidly making its way across the U.S. Also, not a conspiracy other than messed up private pharmaceutical companies caring about profit more than human lives. But there was a vaccine that worked against Lyme disease. It was taken off the market because it wasn't profitable, among other reasons. Story 19. Hollywood is a satanic cabal where you become famous once you sell your soul to one of the 9 major studios. You know they're all in this crap together. At some point, TV, movies, music, commercials, anything going over the air or sold on a shelf, is used to keep masses subservient and distract them from real-world problems within our own lives and externally that they make us believe are either non-existent or impossible to resolve, or just not talk about them at all, anywhere. Multi-billion dollar companies use a fraction of 1% of their funds to prop up a celebrity who will go and make hundreds of millions for the studio, make one person rich to create the image that celebrities are worth something, so people can idolize and look up to them. Celebrities are living ads. This was my conclusion, even before that South Park episode. Story 20. That Bob Lazar actually did work out near Area 51 on alien propulsion technology. And the government is willingly hiding this information from us because if they could recreate this technology, it would essentially cripple the economy overnight. But they are unable to recreate it correctly. There's a documentary on Netflix right now I watched late one night, and it blew my mind. Some of the things he is on record saying decades ago are now nonchalantly admitted by the government when he was called crazy at the time he said it. The production value is a little cheesy, but the content is great. Story 21, that we live in a simulation. During autumn last year in the 11th grade Norwegian class, we were working on giving speeches that would easily convince people. I thought that I'd pick a subject the teacher hadn't heard of, or at least not heard a student propose, and decided to, with the simulation theory. I kind of halfway believed it, but after collecting all my information to convince him, I had successfully convinced myself. Story 22. That a cure for cancer actually does exist, and has for a while, but there is too much money involved in fighting it, that the cure isn't being released for fear that hundreds of thousands of people would lose their careers and money. That or the drug is being offered to the wealthy who can afford the outrageous price tag the drug makers are putting on it. My grandpa and Michael Douglas had the same type of cancer at the exact same time. Michael miraculously went into remission and seems to be doing fine, even though he had stage 4 cancer. My grandpa died 6 months after diagnosis after being fried with radiation treatments. I wish he had whatever treatment Michael Douglas did. Story 23, the Uni Party. The idea that the establishment leaders of both American political parties intentionally work together in a quid pro quo arrangement where they trade power back and forth to keep people fighting over trivial bullcrap like plastic straws and crosses on cemeteries. So no one notices that they both serve the same corporate masters and protect the status quo. That's why there were so many never Trumpers in the GOP. It doesn't have a goddamn thing to do with the man's positions. If they had a problem with his lack of decorum or his assholish position, we would have had a never Santorum movement when he was in the 2012 primaries, because that guy was 10 times as crappy as Trump is. No, they hate Trump because he's a big, noisy, populist monkey wrench thrown into their nice, quiet little organized system. Story 24. That the governments of this world, and other entities mentioned in these things, are double playing the conspiracy theories and theorists, and not only through stigmas like the tinfoil hat. I believe that, for example, if there is one huge leak by one of these guys, or maybe even by someone like Snowden, not him specifically, but someone in his kind of position, or at least someone that won't be instantly deemed a nut job, it's in fact a decoy. You hear about the mess ups they can afford to let you hear about, thus keeping everything in a constant state of confusion. Are they really that stupid to have that leaked? Or are they 3 steps ahead? You can never know. And that's the way they want you to be. I don't know. There's a lot of things that go smoother than silk, and nothing ever truly feels like it's changing. It's like, I don't know, I believe they would have the manpower, the intelligence, and the stakes high enough to pull something like this off. Story 25, I personally believe 9/11 was an orchestrated inside attack. I don't think Bush was directly involved, possibly not even involved at all. But there was a lot of power gained directly after that attack. Suddenly, we have an excuse to invade and export oil directly from the Middle East. We now have a way to arrest someone and remove all of their rights to a fair trial. A one-shot $5 million loss from the government with no explanation can no longer be investigated because of the Pentagon being hit. Unfavorable businessmen were in the World Trade Center during the attack. A lot of them. Suddenly, we have extremely strict air travel rules, new levels of patriotism which can now be abused to the point of blatant propaganda, and a whole lot more. Plus, there is the question as to if it was more done by controlled demolition or not. But that's another can of worms that would require an actual expert to understand. Plus, why is 9/11 the one thing that is constantly talked about almost 20 years later? Nobody brings up Pearl Harbor anymore. And it seems like mass shootings only get talked about up until they have juiced its relevance. Story 26. Please don't downvote me to hell. I think that Trump is actually freaking smart and is hiding it behind the stupid geriatric old man persona. And every decision he takes is extremely well planned and executed. Not for the good of the people, that's for sure, but he might be planning a long game that we couldn't even understand. Maybe he is planning the Trump dynasty of POTUS? I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know. My proof? You absolutely can't convince me that somebody can be so atrociously stupid. Sure as heck that somebody in his position will, at least once in a while, accidentally do the correct thing. Story 27. That the Russians are responsible for more propaganda than just influencing the recent election. That they have been trying to prop up their oil industry by opportunistically trying to influence opinions through various media and activist sources, amplifying fear about nuclear power, global warming denialism, and even some of the more exaggerated fears about fracking, because their economy is so dependent on keeping oil prices high that if the world stops buying from them, they have almost nothing left to offer to sustain a modern state. Story 28. I live in Iran, and it's easy to think all the government officials are dumbasses, and they sure seem like it. And I might be crazy, but it just doesn't add up. All these people are obviously delusional dumbasses with their heads up their asses. And they say some stuff only a child would say. But how are they managing a country? How are they keeping 70 million people in check so seamlessly? My theory, there's one person, a galaxy brain mother trucker, who doesn't believe in any of the beliefs the regime supposedly upholds, and is only dead set on controlling the country. And he is the true top of the country, not the leader who's obviously a crazy old man, not knowing anything other than Islam teachings. And definitely not the president, as he gets changed every 4 years. The other more likely theory that I didn't come up with, but still kind of believe might be the case, is that the leader is actually long dead, and they replaced him with a look-alike. His hand is supposed to be completely disabled, yet it is filmed, he moves it, and his speech mannerisms and accent have slightly changed, along with his facial structure. Story 29. The Anarchist Cookbook wasn't written by William Powell. He was merely the public face for a book prepared by the government to simultaneously make the left look bad while getting anyone stupid enough to follow its recipes for explosives killed. The idea that a 19-year-old with no experience preparing explosives would be able to gather all of this information is beyond ridiculous. And the fact that the advice consistently steers you towards dangerous methods and away from safer ones seems like it can't be an accident. For example, Powell claimed that potassium permanganate, is too unstable to work with safely. But it's actually so safe that the general chemistry class I took used it in the titration experiments. They would not have undergrads who may not have had experience in chemistry handling truly dangerous chemicals. On the flip side of the coin, his recipe for TNT would produce a very unstable version of it, because a step to making it safer was skipped, and the process could produce toxic fumes. This pattern of advising dangerous things and advising against safe ones persists throughout the book. It's absolute garbage, and nobody should trust it for a second. Story 30. Bob Lazar's story. I should make it clear that every time he talks about this story, he states that he cannot prove that any of this happened, due to the fact he has no proof of it happening. Anyways, Bob Lazar is a physicist that worked at a site called S4 near Area 51. At the site, he was tasked with reverse engineering an alien spacecraft that looked like a flying saucer. He spoke of how the craft used some sort of advanced technology that allowed it to manipulate gravity to fly, but he never figured out how it worked, because the technology was just too advanced. He also talked about how the reactor of the craft used a stable isotope of element 115 as fuel, which didn't even exist on our periodic table at the time, but does now and is called Moscovium. I was very skeptical about this story at first, but he recently did a 2-hour interview on Joe Rogan's podcast, episode 1315. And the entire time while he was telling his story, none of my bullcrap alarms were going off. He is very intelligent and just doesn't seem like the kind of person to make all of this up. I'm still very skeptical of his story, but I really want it to be true. If you're interested in this story, I highly suggest watching his interview with Joe Rogan.